Imagine being deemed as the world's first ever female serial killer. Aileen Wuornos had a very tough childhood. Trigger warning in advance because there is a bunch of different triggers in this story. Aileen was abandoned by her mother as a teenager. Aileen and her brother would end up living with their cruel grandfather and alcoholic grandmother. Their grandfather would regularly beat them with a belt buckle, and he would regularly SA Aileen. To make matters worse, he would also allow his friends to do the same thing to Aileen. By the age of 13, Aileen had been SA'd by one of her grandfather's friends who ended up getting her pregnant. She would end up giving the baby up for adoption, but dropped out of school at the age of 14. You may be asking where her father was in all of this. Well, her father had been convicted and jailed for kidnapping a child and SAing them as well. He ended up unaliving himself when Aileen was only 2. After her grandfather ended up kicking them out, Aileen became a worker to make any kind of money she could. At this time, she was only about 15 years old. Aileen had a lot of issues with the law. She would constantly go to bars to see if she could meet new people, find a place to stay, but it would result into her getting into a lot of altercations that got her arrested. At the age of about 33 years old, Aileen started her killing spree. She ended up unaliving about 7 men. At first, she claimed that they were all self-defense because she had met them during her work time and stated that they were all trying to SA her. So she did so in self-defense. Aileen and her girlfriend Tyra Moore would end up moving a lot in between the killing spree. Tyra claimed that she never knew that Aileen was doing these things and that she didn't know to the extent of what was going on and that she was never involved. At one point, Aileen and Tyra were driving around in one of the victims' car and they ended up getting into a car crash. Now, the car crash happened in front of a home and the people from the home came outside to check on them, offered their help, but both of the women just kind of were like, no, I'm good, and just ran off. The people from the home decided to call the cop, and that's when they kind of put everything together that these were the 2 women they were looking for. To lift some fingerprints that ended up matching Aileen's fingerprints, and she was already in the records because of her past. And through media, they were able to find a lot more information and some items that were pawned that also had Aileen's fingerprints, and those things belonged to the victim. On January 9th, 1991, Lee was arrested at a biker's bar called The Last Resort. A trial was held for pretty much every single one of the victims, and she was sentenced to death in all of them. Aileen's execution date was set for October 9th, 2002. Now, the interesting thing about this case is that a lot of people feel like Aileen was a victim and they actually feel bad for her. So I'm curious to hear, do you feel bad for her or no? Let me know your thoughts. Imagine somebody living inside of your home and you having no idea that they're there. Literally one of my worst fears. On March 22nd of 1922, 6 people that lived at the Hinterkaifeck farm in Bavaria, Germany were brutally unalived with a pickaxe. The victims were husband and wife Andreas and Cecilia Gruber, their widowed daughter Victoria, and her 2 children who were Joseph and Cecilia, as well as their maid Maria Baumgartner. Trigger warning for violence, so just I'm warning. The maid Maria was found unalived inside of her bedroom. Little Joseph was found unalived inside of his crib. And as for the rest of the family, they were taken one by one to the barn where they were unalived and then stacked on top of each other and covered with hay. After the family had been unalived, the person who did all of this ended up staying there for a few days, ate food, fed the cows, had the dog tied up in the front, and once he or she was done living there, left. Unfortunately, this is still a cold case, but I will share some really weird facts about this case. To start off, we have Maria, the maid. It was actually her very first day working there. The original maid that they had had for years had quit because she said that the place was haunted and that she kept hearing voices coming from the attic as well as footsteps, but the family did not believe her. A while after the maid had left, the family themselves also actually started hearing the footsteps and voices themselves. So Andreas, who was the father, went upstairs to the attic and he discovered a newspaper he did not recognize. Things started to go missing from the home, including his keys. And at times he would go down to the tool shed, and one of these days he went down there and spotted that the front door of the tool shed had been messed with as if someone was trying to get in but failed. Probably the scariest thing that he discovered was footprints in the snow coming from the woods that led to the back of their home, but no set of footprints leading back to the woods, meaning someone had found their home and stayed there. Unfortunately, this is still a cold case, but they did have one suspect they highly believed did it. The suspect was Lawrence, their neighbor. The reason they believe this is because Lawrence believed that baby Yosef was actually his, since him and Victoria had got it on together. In reality, though, baby Yosef belonged to Victoria's father. They too had been intimate. Also, credit to BuzzFeed for this photo. I took it from their video. I personally don't believe it was Lawrence because he had his own farm next door, so there was no need for him to stay there, eat food, and hang out, and it just made no sense to me. A year after all that happened, the home was torn down and was replaced by this monument for the family. I am curious though, let me know down below if you believe Lawrence did it and your thoughts on this case.